You're listening
to the CD Baby
CD Baby
DIY
Musician
Podcast.
Hey there, and welcome to episode number 141 of the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast. My name is Kevin Bruner, your host for the show, and here with us at CD Baby we have Gretchen Peters. When Gretchen first moved to Nashville, she didn't want to end up being an artist that was forced to record other songwriters' songs. So instead of pursuing a record deal, she set out to prove herself as a songwriter first and landed a publishing deal. When Martina McBride recorded Gretchen's song Independence Day, which also became a smash hit, Gretchen's songwriting talents were in high demand. Since that time, Gretchen has released 5 solo albums and has set out to continue to build a career on her own terms. So let's get to my interview with Gretchen Peters. Joining me here at CD Baby is Gretchen Peters. Gretchen, it's great to have you.
It's crazy good to be here and finally see what goes on.
Yes, you're look behind the curtain at all the magic that happens.
It's the real place, yeah.
And Portland's doing its best to give you some nice sunny weather.
Oh my God, I know. I think y'all are lying about the rain.
It's just a myth to keep people from wanting to move here. So
yeah.
So it's awesome to have you here. You have been nominated for multiple Grammys, CMA Song of the Year, all sorts of accolades for your songwriting and your artistry. And right now you're in Portland because you're on a train tour.
I am. We're starting in Portland, and we are going from Portland through all down the West Coast to LA. Doing the last leg of Fred Eaglesmith's transcontinental train tour, which is put on by a great company called Roots on the Rails, who does these tours on trains all over North America, really. I've done one in Canada, and there's one that went down in Mexico a couple of years ago, and they're really fun. They're kind of like the music cruises, only think of a music cruise on a train, and we have a train car that's completely dedicated to being a venue, and you buy a ticket to ride on the train and you get to go to a concert every night.
How does the venue fit on the train?
Well, it's interesting. Shall I say? It's a bit, if the tracks are rough, it can be slightly hazardous, with mic stands and teeth and, movement, but it all works out. They kind of just, put the stage at one end of a car, one of the bigger cars, and they set up a sound system and everything, and people are sitting in the seats. And needless to say, there are size limitations to the audience, but I think they have somewhere between, depending on the train, they have somewhere between 40 and 50 people that ride the whole train, and they get a different kind of, different band playing every night. I think on this train that we're doing the last leg, but John Fulbright's been on it from, I think, the New York to Chicago leg, and some other artists. So they kind of get something different every night. And then there's, one of the nights we're going to do a little sort of guitar pull where everybody kind of joins in, and all kinds of things happen. It's lots of fun.
It sounds like fun.
Yeah. And of course the scenery from Portland to LA on the train is just going to be spectacular.
Yeah. How many days will it take to get down?
Just 2 days. We get on the train in Portland tomorrow, and we ride to LA, and I think we're in LA at like 9:00 at night the next night.
Wow. Well, it sounds like a lot of fun. How did you get hooked up with something like that?
Well, I did the first train, I think it was in 2005, with Tom Russell, who has been doing these train things for quite a while. And I think, we sort of just felt right at home with the Roots on the Rails folks, the crew who really runs these things. They're just really awesome people. And we kind of fell in with them, and just, I think, you have to kind of be game for, you're on a train with these people for days at a time. You're not just coming into a venue and doing a show and leaving. Yeah. So you kind of have to be game for hanging. Yeah. That's part of the deal. And we just, we had such a good time doing it. I think luckily they asked us back.
Well, that sounds like a really cool way to see the country and hang with your fans. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your career, the brief Gretchen Peters bio, and kind of where you're at, and then we can dive into some questions about songwriting and
Sure.
about just what you've been up to.
Well, I sort of cut my musical teeth, I guess, when I was a teenager in Colorado. I grew up in New York until I was about 13, and then my mom and I, when my parents got divorced, we moved to Boulder, Colorado, and it was really a musical place. It was the 70s. There were, indie bands everywhere. That was where I was sort of introduced to the concept of original music, and where it dawned on me that maybe I could write my own songs instead of just singing other people's. And I lived there for, until I was in my 20s, and I realized I had to move to a music center, and I didn't know whether, to move to New York or LA or Nashville, but at the time, Nashville was going through it was in a rather experimental stage, let's say. They were signing artists like Lyle Lovett and Steve Earle and Nancy Griffith, and I was kind of a folkie, so I thought maybe this is going to be the best fit for me. And I moved to town not really having any knowledge of the concept of, a songwriter who sits in an office like this and writes songs for other people. Like, that wasn't even something I knew existed because I grew up on singer-songwriters. I modeled myself after Paul Simon and Joni Mitchell and Leonard Cohen and people like that. And then later on, Graham Parsons and Rodney Crowell and people like that. But I got to Nashville and there was this whole, do you want to be a singer or do you want to be a songwriter? What do you want to be? Like, I had to choose, And I thought that was bizarre, but the one thing I think I realized early on is that if I were going to try to get a record deal and be an artist, I had to prove that I could write or they would make me sing whatever they wanted me to sing, kind of, I just thought, at least I have to prove my worth as a writer. So I sought a publishing deal before a record deal. I just started looking for a publisher and found one pretty quickly. And really, I think, my success from that point on as a songwriter was more a surprise to me than anybody. I mean, I really never expected to have so much success with other artists recording my songs. I was just really writing what I wanted to write and things that I thought that I might want to record too. But the sort of the first brick in the wall, so to speak, was the first song that I got recorded, which was recorded by George Jones. And that was pretty big, George Jones, king of country music, I thought, okay, well, this is working. And it was just sort of one after another. And I became known as a songwriter, much to my surprise. And finally, after about, almost 8 or 9 years, I got a record deal based on, I think, my success as a writer and just the fact that I had never stopped performing. And my demos were really kind of attempts to make records. I always went sort of above and beyond with my song demos. And my first record came out in 1996. And I sort of took off in the independent direction with my second record. When my first one didn't really take off, that was kind of a light bulb moment for me when I realized, the most important thing for an artist is to be in control of their career. And the only way to do that is to own your masters, be able to, sink or swim with your own faith in yourself. So from my second record on, I was an independent artist I never gave anything else away. And I was lucky enough, incredibly lucky, that my first record label were stand-up guys, and when the record label went under, they gave me my masters back. So I own all my own records, which is pretty unusual for someone who started that long ago.
Yeah, it is. Lots of questions for you on several of the things you said. Go back a little bit to talking some about what you were doing when you were writing, you got a publishing deal.
Mm-hmm.
Like you mentioned, a lot of that world is unknown to folks. I'm sure a lot of artists listening haven't really heard much about it. It's kind of, if you're not in Nashville or certain parts of LA or New York, you really don't encounter it all that often.
Right.
But it's a huge force behind the industry. What was your day-to-day like, and what was your deal with the publishing company?
Well, the first publishing deal I got, they paid me a starvation wage, which is really an advance. It's not even a wage, it's an advance. But just enough to keep you, the idea was it was just enough money to keep you from having to spend all your energy trying to survive. In other words, here's not very much money, but you can feed your baby, know. In order to give you enough breathing room to write songs. And my reaction initially, because no one had ever paid me to write songs, my reaction initially was, I better show up at the office every day, like as if that were, because it was a job.
Yeah.
Luckily, I had a wonderful and empathetic and really perceptive publisher who finally just took me aside one day and said, if you need to get in your car and go drive to Florida in order to write a song, then that's what you need to do. But you certainly don't need to show up here every day. Basically, they just wanted me to write songs and turn them in. And then they would in turn take them and we would demo them. We would make a presentable demo. And then they would pitch them to singers and to record labels, to A&R people. And I have to say, back then, this was 1987. Back then, it was more straightforward in the sense that you didn't have to be connected to the artist or to the label or to the producer in a way that's more so today is the rule. I mean, you didn't have to be sort of. There's a lot more situations in publishing and song pitching and song plugging today where the writers sort of are in a little group with this producer and this artist, and maybe they write together and maybe they all collaborate. And Nashville was kind of wonderful back then in the sense that a really great song, no matter where it came from, had just as much of a shot at landing on a multi-platinum selling record as any other song. And it didn't matter, who came up with it. It was really made the best song win. And I have to say that was, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was a golden era for songs. And I think it led to a really great time in the 90s for country music when there were great songs that really were, some of them kind of edgy and not just straight down the middle what you would expect. And I felt I got my share of those. I wrote those kind of songs. I always think of it as, I wrote the song that an artist like Trisha Yearwood or Faith Hill would want to have one of those songs on her record, but maybe not 12 of them, but I was the one that wrote that one. And I had a shot at that, and I landed those spots on those records quite a few times, and I don't think that's so possible anymore. I think it's changed a lot since then.
So when you said you had to turn in a song, what did you have to give them?
I would make what I would call a work tape. When I got done with a song, I would sit in my room with a tape recorder and just put it down, just me and the guitar, or me and the piano, and it was just a very bare bones, and then here's the lyric and here's the song, here's the tape. And then we together with the publisher and I would decide which songs were worthy of being demoed, with a full band. And my husband, who's sitting over here to my left, Barry Walsh, played piano on my second set of demos, I think. And I never played with another piano player after that.
Sparks just flew.
He started playing on my demos in 1990, I guess. And
wow.
But he would be part of a band that we'd come in and we'd take 4 or 5 songs, in a day in the studio, and we'd flesh them all out and try to, I was always trying to make records. I was, in my mind, when we were doing demos, I was it was almost like I was practicing for my own records. What the publisher wants, of course, is a demo that's going to be able to show the song to its best advantage to a record label and to an artist and kind of make them want to record it, But for me, it was really more selfish than that. It was more like I was just learning my way around the studio, frankly.
How many did you have to turn in, or what was the frequency?
There was always a thing about quota. Like in everybody's publishing deal, there would be a quota, and my quota was always ridiculously low, like 12 songs a year, 20 songs a year, something really low. I actually am not prolific in terms of quantity. I mean, I knew lots and lots of songwriters that would write 50 songs a year, which boggles my mind. But I wrote alone. I didn't co-write. So the songs that I wrote took longer because solo written songs tend to, I think. And the bottom line was if you're writing and turning in great songs and getting people are recording them, nobody's looking at the quota. Nobody cares.
So I'm assuming that as you start getting cuts on records by very well-known artists, the starvation pay gets upped a little bit.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, you definitely sort of move up in the world, and I think the thing that happened with me is that there were certain artists that felt that I was kind of writing. There was an empathy there. They felt sympathetic to those songs and that I was writing, and there were certain artists like Martina McBride, Trisha Yearwood, Patty Loveless was another one that just eventually would come to me for songs when they were getting ready to record. Would say, do you have anything new? And that was the position that you wanted to be in, because then you really had you knew you had some ears on the other side that were really going to actually listen.
So when you get to that point, how do you make the transition to becoming an artist?
Well, that was tricky because, I in my mind, from the time I was picked up a guitar when I was 7, thought of myself as a person who writes songs, plays them, sings them, the whole thing. And then later on I added, making records to that list. And what I didn't really realize is that my success as a songwriter, while it was wonderful, it sort of put me in a box with certain perception-wise. I got a record deal, and I went and I made my first record, and I went out and I did the radio tour, which is what all the labels had all the artists do at that time, which is really literally going to like all the big radio stations in the entire country. It's about 6 weeks of planes, airplanes and cars, and radio station, interviews and things. And what I found there was a definite sense of resistance about, a sort of, the attitude was sort of, well, so you're this successful songwriter, so now you want to be an artist? And I just am sort of appalled that people think of an artist as something you become. I mean, in my mind, it's something that you either are or you're not. And whether you have a record deal or sell 1 million records or sell 2 records, that's not what makes you an artist. What makes you an artist is you have that need to create something, and you're going to do that no matter who's listening. But perception-wise, it was tough to overcome. And when I kind of figured out that really what was the best fit for me was being an independent artist and making my own records and just going my own way artistically as well as business-wise, it took me a while to overcome the public's perception of me as a songwriter. It was almost as if the songwriting part of it they knew about me because of that, but they really kind of didn't know what I really did. So I felt like it was a bit of a hurdle that I had to get past. Yeah. But I the cure for that, as well as the cure for a lot of other things, is touring. And if you do that for long enough, people kind of figure out, what you do.
It is interesting because out of all the cities I've lived in, Nashville is the only one where you feel that split where, you're a songwriter, you're over here.
Yeah.
You're an artist, you're over here. And especially with country music, I've seen that, but it happens in other genres. It's very prevalent in that town. Yeah, it's interesting. So you said the label situation didn't go so well for you, and it really made you want to become, keep control of your catalog, stay independent. What were there any specific things that happened, or just?
I felt the only way I can really think of to even describe it is I felt so uncomfortable all the time when I was signed to while it wasn't a major label, there was major label money behind it, and by all outward signs they operated exactly the same way. Had I been signed to RCA or CBS or whatever, same amount of money, same kind of pressure, and I loved the people that ran this label. I really did, but the bottom line is there are so many pressures to make something work, and it's just almost impossible for a record label, even as well-intentioned as they might be, to not want to shave off all the rough edges. And I felt all kinds of pressures. I felt pressure to conform enough so that we could have some success on radio, because I knew if we didn't have any success on radio, that was going to be the end of it anyway. And they felt like they could break me at country radio, and I kind of deep in my bones knew that I wasn't a country artist. I mean, even though there was a little bit of gray area, there was a little wiggle room, but sort of right when my record came out, Shania Twain hit really big, and I kind of looked and went, okay, well, that's not going to work. This is not, I mean, it was just country music took a right turn and I took a left turn. So there was that. And I just felt, I felt like I couldn't be myself somehow. I felt really constrained. I felt like I think, at the heart of it, I'm an artist. I'm a people pleaser. I think we all are at some level. There's a part of us that just wants to do well, and I think that the way that they wanted me to do well was not a way that I was really ultimately deeply comfortable with. And as soon as I was sort of under my own steam, I mean, one of the great things that happened to me was that early on, my first record, while not doing well here, it did really well in England. And so I felt like I had, there was a place I could go where they somehow were responding to what I was doing, even though it wasn't working on country radio in America. And I went over there early on, and I toured there, and I developed this big audience there. So it was kind of the silver lining to the cloud, really, for me, and it allowed me to sort of stretch out, make another record, because I had some market at least where I knew I could sell it, and grow artistically, and then go over and tour and learn, just have stage time, I mean, that's a big thing for an artist. Back then, it's hard to imagine now, but back then, you couldn't really tour unless you had tour support and label support, and it wasn't like it is now. Yeah. I mean, you really had to have this whole infrastructure. So just being able to put together a tour and go play was a huge thing for me, and to play for people who were understanding what I was trying to do.
So fast forward to today, what kind of team do you have working for you now that you're independent and?
Well, it's funny, I'm getting ready to put a new record out in early next year, February of 2015, and basically what you do is you put together a little record label, but only maybe temporarily in some aspects. In other words, I have a publicist, but probably only for a matter of maybe 6 to 9 to 12 months during the first part of the record release. I have distribution, CD Baby. I have an assistant who helps me sort of ride herd on the whole thing. I have a graphic design. I mean, all the pieces that a record that would have been in-house at a big record label are pieces that I have to put in place. But I really kind of love doing that because, first of all, because in that way I'm in control of the artistic end of things, and also, how every angle of it, like from how the record looks to the video. I just hired a video person to do the first video for the album, and So I'm the record label head, and I'm the artist, and I'm everything, and I'm like the janitor, and and I pay the bills. I'm the accountant, and that is overwhelming at times. But it is like running a little record label. I mean, that's essentially what I'm doing. But it's very gratifying. I would say the only downside to it really is just I can't clone myself, and so there are times leading up to and right at the cusp of releasing a record when you just feel like, oh my God, I don't think I could work any harder if I could stop sleeping, So
in all that, do you do much writing for other artists, or do you go through periods of just focusing on yourself and your career?
My writing for other artists has never really per se been writing for other artists. I mean, even when I was really getting songs recorded by other artists a lot and frequently, I never thought of it as I'm writing for Martina McBride now. I mean, I was just writing songs, whatever needed to be written, whatever was foremost in my, coming out of my brain, that was what I would write. I have, this past year or two, I've written a lot with Mary Gaucher, which
she's been on the podcast.
She has, yeah, and
we love Mary.
It's been really a great thing to write with Mary. I mean, we wrote 3 songs that are on her new album, and one of them was in the TV show Nashville, and it's just been. But aside from the success that we've had with those songs, it's just been. I love Mary, and it's just been great. She's such an intense songwriter, and I love that she'll go that deep with me. And so I wouldn't say I wrote songs for Mary Gaucher, but we sat down for a summer and wrote songs together, and this was the result. These 3 songs on her album, and that's been really great. So I just sort of take it as it comes. When I'm in the throes of of record release, I'm not doing much, or touring. I'm not doing much writing. I'm sort of doing some what I would call collecting. I collect little shiny bits of lyrics and things and put them away for a rainy day. But I definitely have to compartmentalize. It's not like it used to be when I wasn't touring so much and I could sort of carve out 3 or 4 hours a day to write every day. Those days are over. Yeah. Is
there any song that you've had cut that you wish had been on your record and not somebody else's?
Oddly, no. I have a really fatalistic view of it. I just feel like they're kind of like your kids. They're going to be who they're going to be. They're going to grow up and go out in the world. They might do something spectacular. They might not. But they're all different. And early on there was this sort of mentality that if you had a song, and you were an artist, and you if you had a really great song, that you'd save it for yourself. Yeah. Now I just sort of don't. I think it's a free for all. You record it, I'll record it, we'll all record it. Yeah. I think people are interested to hear different versions of songs. My new record is called Blackbirds, and it has 2 versions of the song Blackbirds that I wrote with this young Irish songwriter named Ben Glover. And Ben's record, which is coming out in September, has a duet version with him and me singing. So there will be 3 versions of the same song by next February that'll be out there in the world. And I think people like that. I mean, I think music fans are fascinated by how songs can, different versions can take on different qualities and different lives.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Plus, his fans become fans of you and vice versa.
I mean, I just think it was a crazy notion that we had that only one artist gets a song, and that it's somehow tainted if it's been recorded before. But somehow that was sort of that was the mentality in Nashville when I got there. That's how it worked.
Well, you wrote a blog post for us titled "Letters to a Young Artist." And you had some great insights in there. One of the things that you mentioned was about, it was under the header skill counts. And I have a line, you said, most art is the result of short bursts of inspiration followed by a long slog of grunt work.
Yeah.
And that was you kind of wrote more about that, but it just seems that a lot of folks kind of expect this magic all the time and feel. I guess I think why a lot of people resonated with that as artists, there's the tendency to feel excited when something's happening, but then kind of alone and kind of left behind when you're having to slog through making a record, especially.
The slogging is definitely not the fun part. Yeah, I mean, Leonard Cohen talks about what a workmanlike approach he has to take to writing and how hard he works at it. And I think if you listen to the lyrics of Leonard Cohen and how utterly inspired and perfect they are, and you realize that he really worked like notebooks full of lyrics to get the right 4 verses or whatever, that's an insight into what's really involved. I mean, there is such a thing as inspiration, no doubt about it. But to me, the inspiration part is there's sort of the little sort of nuggets that have to be worked around and worked into and made into a real song. And the craft part of it, that's where that comes in. And if you really, really get good at it, and everyone's a journeyman. I'm still trying to figure out how the heck you do it. But if you really, really get good at it, the seams show less and less. The inspiration versus the parts that are crafted and the parts that just came to you. Mm-hmm. I think when you get really good at it, the seams don't show because you're approaching this target, which is infinitely far away, but you do get closer and closer as you get better at it. But there's a lot of really, really hard work. I mean, it's a job. Mm-hmm. It's a job like any other job. Like think about a carpenter who makes really beautiful furniture out of pieces of wood, and some of the pieces of wood are perfect just the way they are, and some of them have to, give you problems, and they have to be worked and reworked, and it's sort of that same thing. Mm-hmm. It is at some level, you're building something, and that there's definite skill involved in that. Mm-hmm.
What advice would you have for somebody who's interested in pursuing more of a career in songwriting these days? Like, do they need to move to Nashville? Is that still important? Can they do it from anywhere? Or
I guess the landscape has changed so much. It's hard for me to even know what sort of advice, but it seems to me that it's still important to be in a music center. And it seems to me that it's even more important now to network, to know. I mean, because there are so many more artists who are co-writing their own. If they're not writing their own songs, they're co-writing them at least. And there are a lot of producers who are in on the writing of whole albums now, much more so than there were when I started. So that whole part of it, just sort of finding a group of people that you have some kinship with musically, that seems like it's more important than ever. But yeah, I mean, I think, I think back on the advice that Harlan Howard, the great country songwriter, had hits in 5 decades, I think. Whenever any young songwriter would bitch about, not getting noticed or whatever, not getting an award or whatever, he would say, well, I don't recall that you got an invitation. You got to remember, above all, there's plenty of people that would be happy to take your place in line. So I think that's foremost in my advice.
That was one of the things that when I lived in Nashville, on one hand made the city extremely exciting. On the other hand, it was like, oh my gosh, there are so many guitar players. Yeah. There's so many songwriters. Everybody is here to do the same thing. How am I ever going to get through all this?
You have to have some kind of crazy belief in yourself. I mean, you really do. You have to have some kind of irrational, crazy belief in yourself. And I definitely had that. But I also had, the opposite side of the coin. I mean, I remember the first time I went to hear a songwriter in Nashville right after I'd moved there. It was Don Schlitz, who wrote The Gambler for Kenny Rogers. And I went to the Bluebird, and I heard Don Schlitz sing The Gambler. And first thing that went through my mind was, I've never actually listened to the words. This is really a great song. I really heard it, like having not heard it on the radio 1,000 times before, not really hearing the lyrics. The second thing that crossed my mind was I should just leave. I should go back to Colorado. But I didn't, because I had that crazy irrational belief in myself, and that's why you kind of have to have both. You have to be receptive and have enough self-doubt to improve, but you have to have enough self-confidence to think you can cut it, you know?
Yeah. It's a blessing and a curse, because it's so exciting. The music is everywhere, and you're all there in the middle of it.
I think the key to it, a lot of it is find your tribe, find your friends, because that's what's going to sustain you through the rough times. And it is a brutal business, but it not only will it sustain you, but if you find your friends that are doing the same thing that you're doing, when one of you has some success, a lot of times they bring the others along, and I think that's it's on a lot of levels, it's important to have your peers.
Well, do you have any final thoughts to share with us? Anything about pursuing a career independently, or just encouragement to those listening?
I just think that the key, as simple as it sounds, one of the keys about pursuing an independent career, and I know so many artists that were kind of in the system like I was, who had a lot of fears about doing it independently, is that you can learn as you go. I mean, there's not some big secret that needs to be imparted to you before you can do it. I mean, I'm amazed sometimes at how good my instincts are at thinking about what the people that come to hear us, what our fans are going to want, in terms of, merch, in terms of all kinds of things. I realize now I'm actually the best judge of that. And there's not some bigger, smarter, record company dude that's, that knows more than I do about the people that like our music. And if you can sort of own that power, it'll give you the confidence to do what you need to do in order to manage yourself and manage your career and strike out on your own. And I think that's what really all the encouragement artists really need.
Well, thank you so much for stopping by, CD Baby. Next time you come, we'll have you bring your guitar, and
we'll
That'll have you play
fun.
But yeah, good luck with
I want to roller skate through the warehouse.
You could,
it's so amazing.
It's a nice cement floor. You could roller skate in it. So I'm surprised somebody hasn't done that before.
Me too.
Good luck with the rest of the train tour, and looking forward to the new record.
All right. Thanks.
You. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the podcast. If you want to weigh in on this episode, you can do so in the comments section at cdbabypodcast.com, or you can email us at podcast@cdbabypodcast.com, or if you'd like, you can call our listener line. That number is 360-524-2209. Just try to keep your calls brief and to the point. It'll only give you about 2 minutes to leave a message, but leave us a message there, and if it's good, we'll play it on the show. So we'll catch you next time. Bye. You've been listening to the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast, broadcasting from Portland, Oregon, USA.